So today we're going to go over a article from the East Anglia Bylines. As of course you know, the Bylines Network, they're very good. Go out, give them support. They are very good at what they do. However, this article, I've got a bit of criticism for it, but honestly, the vast majority of this, I do quite agree with. And of course, the premise is that when, Starmer gets into government, his stance on Brexit will have to change in some way, shape, or form. And we've talked about this on the channel before. I've talked about it before, that what you do, or at least what many of us have sort of suspected that, the Starmer plan would be, is you ignore Brexit for the time being, you get into power, and then when you're in power, you can actually have proper conversations about Brexit. Now, you're not immediately going to rush to rejoin things, but there is nothing stopping Starmer going to the EU and say, hey, if we do an alignment deal, if we agree to follow your rules and regulations on this, will you allow us to get rid of this trading barrier? Let's say we are going to now heavily enforce the UK rules on animal products and things like that of coming into the country. Would you then be prepared to lower the trade barriers in some way, shape, or form? I do not think that is a long shot. I think that is quite doable. Because one of the things we have heard from the EU is, hey, UK, if you want to come and talk, we are ready to listen. And we have actually seen that in action with Rishi Sunak. So the idea that a lot of people say, oh, the EU won't negotiate, that they are, you've signed the terms, you've got to accept them. That doesn't seem to be true at all, considering what we have seen Rishi Sunak do with the Windsor Framework. We've seen constant EU officials say, hey, if the UK wants to come and talk with us and chat with us, we are open to that. That is a very, very good sign. And ultimately, as we said, what would happen was that Starmer could then go, this is Brexit. This is as best as Brexit is ever going to be. Are you sure you still really want this? And then, of course, you could have another referendum, because they could just go, look, this is Brexit. This is as best it is going to be. There is no better situation than this compared to when we had it in the EU. This is all the stuff we've lost, etc., etc. Are you really sure you want this? Again, we've seen the polls. We've seen the disappearing support for Brexit. I think very much over the next parliament, you're going to get a lot of pro-EU MPs in parliament. And of course, we will actually be able to have proper conversations about this, not ideologues just sprouting up and then trying to shut down the conversations. We're going to have actual conversations about it. So there's a lot of hope going into not only this parliament, but the next parliament as well, where we've talked before about having a progressive majority that can get a lot of good stuff done. So we're going to go into this article, and I'm sort of going to go through it, go over my criticisms of it, some stuff I feel that I think should be sort of talked about a bit, maybe discussed a bit more. But yeah, before we do go into that, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, we'll see, there is the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club as well down below. So, the first part of this article basically lays it out that this is it. That Labour is going to come in, and that it's Labour really is our hopes do lie in sort of maybe rejoining the EU come from here. I do agree with that. And of course, he does call out what he says is Starmer's silly statement to make Brexit work. Well, I've said I think it's part of the Starmer's plan to go, hey, this is Brexit. This is as best as it is ever going to be. You've seen hard Brexit. Now we've done our Brexit. Are you still really sure, British public, that is what you want to see? we've seen the declining polls, we've seen the declining support. That continues to be um, our eventual way back. The other thing he says, and he sets out ideas to quote build on the existing trade and cooperation agreement in pursuit of a closer trading relationship. And this is where I disagree with him because that is good. That is said what we said is part of the plan. But the author goes on to say, but the EU doesn't see it this way at all and has no intention of revisiting the already agreed trade terms. Not true. The EU has said multiple times from multiple people, if you want to come and talk with us and sit down, we are prepared to sit down and do that. If Rishi Sunak can do that, I really do think that Starmer could do the same as well. And everyone has said it. You know, Boris's bill, the trade and cooperation agreement, is completely meatless. There is no meat on the bone. That Boris just gave up a ton of stuff because he didn't want to do it, because it would mean that we would have had to follow a lot of EU rules and regulations. Starmer could go back to the EU and said, hey, we're going to follow those EU rules and regulations. Um, you know, get that second legislation passed, to enforce those rules. There is a possibility to then really actually build on, put some meat on the bones. This is not a new thing that has been said. A lot of people and trade experts have said this before, that you can build on the trade and cooperation agreement to make it better. Now, of course, it's not going to be as good as we were and had it back in the EU, but that ultimately, as I've said, would be part of Starmer's plan. The next part he goes on to talk about this. Starmer cheered on by a few Express readers. And he talks about, of course, after the euphoria, after all dust has settled, after the whole potential general election, they've got to talk about where that support for Brexit comes from. Voters we've seen continuously are rejecting Brexit. There is increased calls to have another referendum on Brexit. The Conservatives are going to be completely destroyed by having an almost tiny minority in Parliament, be riven by infighting. They are just not going to be an effective opposition. They are not going to put forward their own ideas on Europe. The Lib Dems, I think, will also turn and become, I think, increasingly more pro-European as they used to be. I think that is their way back under it. So I think a lot of support in the next parliament will be a lot more talking about Brexit, a lot more pressure on trying to fix these Brexit problems. How do we fix these Brexit problems? Well, we've got to go talk and negotiate with Europe. That's how we've got to do it. And Europe has said that it is more than happy to sit down and do that. And I think that's possible, which would then lead us to that situation of where Starmer can turn around and go, this is Brexit. This is as best it is going to be. Are you sure, British public, is this what you really want? The next part is no Brexit support left means bowing to the bleeding obvious. So here's the responsibility for bringing about change that lies with the Labour Party and members, in particular, all those new MPs, whether Starmer wins a slim majority or by a huge landslide. There are forces which would suit pro-EU purposes. Yeah, this is what I agree with as well. I think, to be honest, Starmer is going to end up with a majority, especially when you look at the polls. But of course, as we say, a week's a long time in politics. A year is an eternity, and of course, we don't know when the next general election is going to be held. It may be held at the last possible moment in January of 2025. That is entirely possible. We're just gonna have to wait and see what the landscape ends up looking like, after potential general election. But there's one thing I do agree with you on this, and it is about new MPs stirring up trouble. So you say this with a majority of, say, nearly a couple of hundred, that would leave an awful lot of idealistic of idealistic new MPs sitting on their hands, with no chance of preferment and with nothing to do but stir up trouble in the tea rooms. Appeals by the whip to toe the line would mean little, since there would be no serious opposition outside the party. Thatcher was warned of these dangers of an unstable large majority, but she scoffed at the idea, and look what happened to her. I do sort of agree with that. That is a potential danger. If Labour does go in and win this absolute, you know, um, massive landslide, that is something that Starmer is going to have to do. Make sure that party discipline remains strong, and occasionally he's going to have to crack the whip. And it will be new potential MPs causing trouble because, idealistic new MPs who want to do this, want to do that, not in the manifesto, so we can't, really commit to do something like that fully. But um, it would cause problems, and I think in a potential parliament with how it's looking at the moment, with um, pretty much a massive Labour majority, and to be honest, very little few of the parties left. Like I say, the Conservative Party aren't really going to be in a fit state for any opposition whatsoever. The SNP don't really look like they're going to come out of a fit state either from the next general election. And the Lib Dems aren't probably also, even though they will probably gain seats, they are not going to be an effective, opposition, I think. So it all really does come down to Labour. And then this is where he comes on to offering proportional representation. I really do think, again, this is something we need to look at, but not only just in Westminster. I think the first target should be absolutely be the House of Lords. We get rid of the House of Lords, replace it with a um, a house of like regional representation where every region gets split up. Um, and each region has X amount, so that no region gets more than others, and you do it by proportional representation. So let's say Yorkshire, I don't know, let's say it's 10, so Yorkshire gets 10 MPs, so you might get I don't know, what, 6 Labour, 3 Tory, I don't know, maybe 1 Lib Dem, maybe like 1 Yorkshire Party member, but that's how I can see it probably potentially gaining out. And of course, you do worry about, of course, the EU will be looking at signs of change in British attitude that is real. And will there be no revolving door when the next government to back a hard Brexit? One move that they would find encouraging would be the introduction of proportional representation, since this would mitigate against any kind of putsch which saw the Tory right grab power. This is, again, something that we should really do. I say, Starmer's refused to discuss it, so the electorate aren't interested. Again, I completely disagree. You see proportional representation being talked about even more. Again, something that really needs to happen. Back the groups in Labour that are supporting PR, give them, back more power, back more Labour MPs getting into power who are pro PR. We've said, of course, about the guy who lost in Uxbridge by about 400 votes. He was pro PR. He would have been a good voice for PR in the Labour Party. Having more pro PR MPs in the Labour Party is a good thing. But I don't think it will happen this Parliament. Might not even happen maybe the next Parliament. Of course, changing PR for Westminster. But I think not the next Parliament, but the Parliament after. Maybe you could genuinely seriously put forward reforming the House of Lords in a quite significant way. I think that is something that needs to happen, and I think that really should be the first target that we go after for reforming. Now, don't get me wrong; I do want to see Westminster change to a PR system as well, but I think the House of Lords is a far, far more better target. There's far, far more cross-party support, and the House of Lords is such an easy sell to actually get proper reform. The only thing is once it's in there, get reform passed tends to obviously be the problem. We've seen this with Tony Blair. We saw this during David Cameron. they try, and there's a big pushback from, of course, the Lords. This idea of, oh well, but if you've got the political will to be able to do it, and you've got the political support to be able to do it, then yeah, I think we really can do that and see that. So, like I say, let me know what you think down below. But of course, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button before you leave. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.